Welcome to LS200, Leadership Theory and Practice. The audio portion of these presentations are available to those of you who may find it useful. So what is leadership anyway? Well, James McGregor Burns, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and political scientist, writes that leadership over human beings is exercised when persons with certain motives and purposes mobilize resources to arouse, engage, and satisfy the motives of the followers. In other words, the goals of the followers and the leader are totally aligned. Burns would not call those who, as he writes, obliterate followers leaders. He labels them power wielders. And power wielders may treat people as things, but leaders do not. Burns doesn't see as leaders those who fail to arouse, engage, and satisfy the motives of the followers. To meet the expectations of authentic leadership, according to Burns, there's clearly a shared meaning between the two cohorts, the leader and the follower. The leader is speaking in a distinctive voice and demonstrates a capacity to adapt to his followers, right? They're having conversations, they're listening, they are collaborating together. And importantly, the leader demonstrates integrity. What words come to mind when you think of leadership? I invite you to reflect on that for a moment. Here you see some descriptives from students who responded to this question. Servant leadership, respect, support, giving back, responsibility, strength of character, loyalty, humility, communication, judgment, and discretion. Some pretty good words. And I imagine you have some other descriptives that will also fall in this category. Barbra Kellerman, another important leadership guru who wrote the book Bad Leadership, shares that millions of dollars are spent to develop people who can, quote, fix what's wrong. And over the past couple of decades, the discipline of leadership has really grown so much. I spoke earlier about Burns's hypotheses that leaders speak in a distinctive voice. Lincoln, as an example, in the context of the World War, spoke of healing the nation's wounds. George Washington, his vision of America would, quote, give to mankind the magnanimous and too novel example of a people always guided by an exalted justice and benevolence. Martin Luther King describes a dream for his children in which they would, quote, one day live in a nation where they would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Kellerman writes about the importance of the study of bad leadership as well as good leadership. A study of leadership can be confusing. There are so many examples of bad leaders. Richard Nixon, financial wizard Bernie Madoff, Dennis Kozlowski, a one-time CEO of Tyco, amazingly successful, but discovered to be totally corrupt. It can be misleading. Leadership can be considered the exercise of influence or a power relationship, an instrument of goal achievement, but these are value-free definitions. There's no context to make distinctions between leaders and power wielders. So this is not apples to oranges, but rather apples to apples. To converge the two, good and bad leadership is a disservice, as Kellerman writes. We all want good leadership, and the way to encourage it is the study of good leadership, teaching, and the practice of it. But it's also vital to study bad leadership. This is the final slide of this presentation, but just to say that in this course, we will have the opportunity to examine leadership using a number of lenses. We'll use Bowman and Deal's lens. We'll use Barbra Kellerman's lens and a couple of chapters from her book, and one or two additional articles to examine leadership. There's no correct lens. There's no right way to think about leadership. There's a lot of good material out there for us to examine. By the end of the course, you will have had an opportunity to put a number of tools in your toolbox to write about, think about, and analyze leadership.